Welcome to our webinar today. The webinar today is entitled, What's Ahead for Compliance in 2022 and Beyond? Next slide. A little housekeeping. Everyone but speakers are muted at this time. This meeting is being recorded and will be shared after the session if you like. There will be a survey at the end of this webinar for you to fill in order to receive a copy of the session, and also additional documentation that will explain in more detail the topics we are covering. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, please feel free to use the comments section of the webinar, and we will get to you at the end, or if we run out of time, we can follow up with you after the session. Next slide. Your speakers today are myself, Karen Neal Strobel. I'm a supply chain expert with over 36 years in the industry. And we have Sri Venakata, our head of regulatory compliance at APA Engineering. And we have Krishna Rao, our head engineer and compliance engineer at APA Engineering. Next slide. A little bit about APA. We have over 21 years experience and over 350 different customers across the world in US, Europe, and Asia Pacific. We have several certifications available, and also we have offerings at our company that include compliance, engineering, product sourcing, and software development. Specific to the compliance area, we have compliance software, also we have services, and we can offer you turnkey solutions that help you get the work done quickly and painlessly. Next slide. And now it's time for a quick poll. Please take the poll and answer the question accordingly. All right, thank you very much. And now our agenda. First, we'll do a quick overview of all the regulations that are coming in 2022 and beyond. Then we'll take a tour of a deeper dive into these regulations for Europe, the US, and Asia Pacific. And then we'll wrap things up with a recap and summary. Next slide. Now, to dive into the overview and what's ahead in 2022, the first thing we're going to talk about is the United Kingdom. After Brexit, the UK has decided to have its own version of REACH. The good news is it is identical to EU REACH in a lot of areas, but there are some differences which we will outline in a future slide. Then we have the China REACH. The China REACH is now combined with the regulation of MEE Order 12. Again, the good news is it's a lot like the EU's REACH, but there are a few differences which we will cover in a future slide. And then we have the India REACH. This is not official yet, but it is coming, and it's very similar to EU REACH, but there are a few differences which we will also cover. And now diving into ROHS. The United Kingdom also has an ROHS regulation, and this is for Great Britain and Northern Ireland. There are a few differences between the UK's version and the EU version of ROHS, which we will speak to in a future slide. Next slide. In Germany, there is now a Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. This expands the conflict minerals scope to include new minerals, some that have been in discussions for some time. We will dive into that in a future slide as well. Then we have California Prop 65. The labels the short form labels that have been used are going away. While they haven't set a firm date yet, there has been a lot of discussions. They were planning on doing that in 2021. They have delayed it into the first quarter of 2022, but nothing is firm yet. But this will give you some ideas on what we need to prepare for because it is coming. Then we have the Tesca Pbt, which is around the usage of an additional 5 PBT substances. This is applicable to the US as it's outlined in the EPA, but it could apply to Canada in the future as well. And then Italy now has packaging regulations that are for packaging materials. This includes disposal instructions in the codes for the packaging materials. And we'll talk about those in more detail in a future slide. There are plenty of others as well, and we will give you an overview of those in the next few slides. Next slide. And now to dive into the Europe region compliance areas, I will turn things over to Sri Venakata. Sri?
Thank you, Karen, for the wonderful introduction. I shall cover the new regulations and the proposed amendments in the European region. The next slide. So let's start with the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. Next slide. So one of the important regulations that shall have a major impact on the entire supply chain is the new German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. It is effective from 2023 June and applicable to Germany to start with. The bill was already passed in June 2021. The objective of this particular regulation is particularly whoever is doing with the business are obliged to find out and assess the human rights and environmental risk under the risk management system. This is applicable to the companies having their business in the Germany and employing more than 3,000 employees. That is effective from 2023 and more than 1,000 employees from 2024. Of course, there are penalties too that can go up to 2% of the turnover. Next slide. So what exactly is this German Due Diligence Act? The companies will be required to report annually on the due diligence activities of human rights risks and environmental risks. So to achieve this, the company should carry out risk analysis of their direct and indirect suppliers once in a financial year. It is also indirectly called as ESG reporting. The similar regulation, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance reporting. Similar regulation is also being discussed in the USA. So the company should also take immediate action on the suppliers if they find any violation during the survey process. So practically, what exactly they need to do is customers have to survey all their direct supply chain and indirect supply chain with a set of questionnaires as per the ESG, review them. The ESG, again, there are certain standards which are available in the market, guidelines that are available in the market. As per that, we will have to take judicious calls to observe what kind of, if you find any violation in it, we'll have to take action. And also some of the OEMs have started surveying the supply chain on the smelter and mine details for the minerals that includes aluminum, cobalt, lithium, glass, and include nickel, steel, iron that have more than 10 grams. It is similar to the conflict minerals survey. So in a nutshell, you will have to observe, have a closer eye on the supply chain, ensure that they follow the ethical practices and does not violate any human rights and environmental risks. And in this particular process, human rights and environmental risks are particularly associated in the mining level in some areas. So that is the reason, the conflict minerals, not only on the 3TG, but also on the additional minerals and the source of custody or reasonable country of origin is being questioned by the companies. Next slide. Let's talk about Emrt. So Emrt stands for Extended Minerals Reporting Template. So it is one of the biggest relief that RMI has provided was releasing this EMRT. Otherwise, companies were conducting the surveys using two different templates for mica and cobalt separately. Now that RMI has issued the new template with the capability to survey both cobalt and mica in the same template. So it was issued, the first version was issued, the latest version was issued on the November 2021. It is not a regulation yet, either in the Europe or in the USA, to collect the mica or cobalt details. However, many companies have started collecting these minerals details and their respective smelters or RCOI. They are as they are extensively used in the electric vehicles. Maybe soon it can be a part of German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act very soon, and it has got seven questions that need to be answered for both cobalt and mica, and the supplier also has to provide the smelter details. Next slide. UK reach. So post Brexit, the UK is following its regulations. One such regulation is UK Reach. It is effective from 1st January 2021. It has got several transitional periods several conditions, but essentially UK Reach is almost identical to EU Reach with a different governing body, HSC. UK-based companies who have already registered their chemicals with the EU REACH certification, given a time until 27th October 2021 to apply for REACH, stating with for volume of 1 ton per annum. The provisions for out of scope are almost same as EU REACH. Here there is a silver lining, that is authorization is almost same as EU, that is 97 substances, but it is in fact it is lesser substances. EU UK reach is 6 months lesser than EU reach, we can say. Once the substance is identified as an SVHC, it will be included in the candidate list. Now the candidate list stands at 209 as on 8th July 2021. But if you look at the EU, the number of substances are 219. It is, they are taking inspiration from EU and putting it in the UK, I would say. There shall be a complete restriction of a substance placed in the UK market if it poses an unacceptable risk to the human health and environment. Currently, there are 74 of such substances as on 30th March 2021. Next slide. So this is the UK ROS. Again, post-Brexit, another regulation that was adopted by UK is UK ROS. It is effective from 1st January 2021. The major difference is the marking. Here in the EU ROS, you have a CE marking, but in the UK ROS, you require a special symbol called UKCA. And so the in scope is almost equivalent to EU ROS, that is with a voltage rating not exceeding 1000 volts for AC and 1500 volts for DC. Of course, there are also penalties that ranges that can go up to 20,000 pounds, and the authority OPSS has the authority to withdraw the goods that are put on the Great Britain market if you fail to comply with the ROS standard. Next slide. So out of scope, there are certain, definitely there are, these are the out of scope. So it is in line with almost in line with the EU ROS, but one has to look into, do a deep dive to understand whether the product falls under the out of scope or not. Next slide. So if you are doing business in the UK, especially if you're a manufacturer, importer, or even a distributor, they are responsible for ensuring the compliance of whole product being placed in the UK. They are also responsible for producing and maintaining the technical documentation along with the declaration of conformity, which is a signed document that declares the listed product is fully compliant with the mandatory requirements of Roche regulation, and also required to place an symbol UKCA. So so we don't need to specific details other than UKCA symbol to start with. A declaration letter would be sufficient. Here we have summarized the high level of comparison across the world wherever ROHS is already implemented. If you look at, in summary, EU, UK restricts 10 substances, and rest of the countries restricts 6 substances. Especially a marking is needed for UK, EU, China, Japan, and scope and exemption may vary from country to country. But in a nutshell, if the product is EU ROHS compliant, you can say it is almost compliant with the rest of the countries except for the marking. So post Brexit, there are certain things which are, Roche and Reach are the major developments that were incorporated by UK. However, there is a relief for skip. There is no skip type of regulation which is available in the UK. Currently, it is limited only to the EU, and we may not expect in the near future. That's on the UK. Next slide. Time for a quick poll. Please answer the questions. Thank you. Now I request my colleague Krishna to present the rest of the new regulations or amendments in the European region. Krishna.
Thanks, Sriram. Let's move on to SKIP and its new features. Next slide. Yeah. Last year, SKIP piqued the interest of manufacturers and suppliers across EU. Companies have started implementing SKIP in IMDS also, but at the moment, not many are using it. A number of third-party softwares have emerged for making bulk submissions. Around 1 million dossiers have been submitted so far. And equivalently, surveys were conducted by ECHA to receive feedback on the quality of usage. The biggest challenge faced by users was the portal loading process, which consumed a lot of time. And hence, to make the database more user-friendly, SKIP has decided to roll out new features and upgrade the performance levels for higher efficiency. And some of these new features are a new search option is now present to help users find their skip submissions using skip numbers. It will only be possible to search with complete and valid skip numbers, as partial or incomplete numbers would not produce any search results. Data submitted through simplified skip notifications, SSNs, will also be processed from this month, which will in turn help users to search using skip numbers that are referencing other notifications. A search block for article identifiers has been revamped with options to search for different identifier types and to modify the search operator. And changes to the IUclid format includes updates to the article category list, which is the harmonized list based on TARIC, TARIC, which stands for Integrated Tariff of the European Union list. The loading time for the front-end portal has been taken care of. Enhancements in the overall processing of large and complex articles will make for better user experience. Although SKIP is mandatory, customers are not making submissions for all of their products. This could be due to a lack of an enforcement policy. Manufacturers and suppliers can expect member states to come up with penalty structures in the near future also. It is advised that skip be taken up seriously by every manufacturer and supplier. Let's move to the next topic. Hmrc plastic packaging tax. Next slide. The objective of this Hmrc plastic packaging tax is to encourage businesses to use recycled plastic in the manufacture of plastic packaging, and thereby increasing levels of recycling and collection of plastic waste, and also to avoid more landfill or incineration. This tax applies to UK manufacturers of plastic packaging and importers of plastic packaging, business customers of UK manufacturers as well as importers, and also consumers who buy plastic packaging in the UK. Imported plastic packaging will come under plastic packaging tax, whether the packaging is filled or unfilled. If you are a business that needs to register for the tax, you will need to pay plastic packaging tax on any packaging that contains less than 30% recycled plastic. The tax will be charged at £200 per ton. So for example, if you manufacture like 10 tons of plastic packaging and like 1 ton has less than 30% of recycled plastic, you will be need to pay £200 for that 1 ton. All businesses that manufacture or import plastic packaging must keep records pertaining to the packaging they manufacture or import. Records should be kept of plastic packaging that you manufacture or either import, even if you do not need to notify your liability to register for the tax. Manufacturers and importers of less than 10 tons of plastic packaging per year are exempted from this rule. Some plastic packaging products are also exempted based on their function. Plastic packaging where the function is secondary to the storage function, for example, like glasses, glass cases, and power tool boxes. So similarly, other plastic packaging products like printer cartridges containing ink or toner and inhalers will also be exempted, since they serve like an important function to the product. Likewise, there are no such exemptions for other plastics, and the derogation criteria mainly depends on the purpose of the plastic packaging. This Hmrc tax comes into effect on 1 April 2022, and you must inform Hmrc that you are liable to register by 30 April 2022. More information on how to register later, more information will be published later this year, and we could recognize from those websites. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah, Italy packaging directive. Next slide. Italy has recently passed a legislative decree making environmental label mandatory. From the 1st of Jan 2022, packaging will be labeled in a certain way as instructed by the Italian government. All packaging material would have to comply with this regulation irrespective of the type of packaging. And packaging which is used for medicinal products are exempt from this requirement. So details of these regulations are as follows. So producers need to specify the type of packaging on the label through the use of alphanumeric codes, and these codes can be fetched from the 97/129 EC directive. The label should also contain references or instructions for disposal, which would help in proper waste management of these packaging materials. If the packaging is manufactured from polymers or polymer combinations for which alphanumeric codes are not given in the 97/129 EC directive, other standards which are UNI 1043-1 and UNI 10667-1 standards could be used for the identification of plastics and recycled polymers respectively. The next slide. So this legislation, it has different sets of instructions for labeling depending on the business transaction that is taking place. So if it is a B2C, which is business to customer packaging, the alphanumeric code remains constant, and this code will remain constant in all scenarios. The reference document for material identification code will be also the same. Producers are also advised to inscript the wording collection in brackets main material family by weight on the label, or they also have another option where they need to present the main material family by weight along with the phrase separate collection. And by this process, they will be instructing the end consumer to check with the local municipal guidelines for disposal. The list of requirements for the environmental labeling vary according to the type of component packed, and the component could either be a single or multi-component. And on the other hand, if the transaction is business to business, B2B, only the code for composition materials remain mandatory on the packaging label. All other requirements are voluntary. A small heads up to all manufacturers, suppliers and distributors in EU. So we can see to the bottom right of our screen a small table with recycling targets. And so by the end of year 2025, that is 31/12/2025, EU has laid out a requirement for its member states, and they have a requirement of 65% of all packaging material must be recycled. And this number is further increased to 70% by the end of the year 2030. Yeah, next slide. And now I would like to ask Sriram to continue with the rest of the topics.
Thank you, Krishna. That was a good coverage on the Europe. We will talk about the regulations and amendments in the USA region. Next slide, please. The California Prop 65. So the one of the well-known regulation in the USA is this California Prop 65 regulation. It is also called as a labeling requirement. So the current warning or wordings might get changed to ensure businesses disclose the substance details in the product. The short form of label, such as cancer, the first box, is currently being practiced by many customers. So which is no more, which may not be acceptable in the near future. In the first one, if you look at it, this is only short form. It doesn't talk about the substance. It says either cancer or a birth defect. That's the only element which is present out there. And the proposed short form is applicable only in certain areas, and that too, even though it is a short form, that should have the substance name details. So that puts a lot of burden on the manufacturers to identify what are all the Prop 65 chemicals which are present in the products. So previously, the manufacturer could escape by not putting the substance name by using the first box option. But now, if the amendment is implemented, inclusion of substance becomes mandatory, and the manufacturers have to be prepared to get the details of Prop 65 substances and keep them handy. So inclusion of substances names may become mandatory. It is under the draft stage. It might be effective from 2022 mid. Next slide. As said, the short form of a warning may be used only if the following criteria is met. It should not be the area of a product label cannot be if it is less than 5 square inches, or the package or shape is too small to accommodate the length of warning, or if the whatever it may be, the short forming label cannot be less than 6-point type. And the only silver lining that we have here is if the amendment is going to be adapted, there will be a breathing period of 1 year or 12 months would be given, so that from the date of amendment. So in that period, manufacturers can use the time to collect the assess the details of Prop 65 substance presence. Especially for internet and catalog purchases, the short form does not be applicable because they have enough space, or they can provide hyperlink so that the customers, when they click on it, it should display the complete link with the substance names. So net, there is a burden on the manufacturers, I would say, whoever is using the short form of label. They have to work with their supply chain to find out the Prop 65 chemicals which are associated in their products. Next slide. So we'll talk about the Mercury reporting rule. Next slide. So it is effective from 2nd November 2021, and it is a part of a Tesca regulation. So like the reach to Europe, reach regulation to the Europe, Tesca is also becoming a reach-like regulation to the USA. They are including all chemicals which are governed by separate regulations. They are trying to include in the Tesca regulation. So one such regulation is Mercury reporting. It was already there implemented in 2018. However, with an exemption of if there is an importer that imports any articles, they need not report the mercury to the EPA. But however, that exemption has been removed currently. So that is the biggest change. Now importers of a pre-assembled product that contains any component that have mercury in them will be subjected to reporting requirements under Tesca. They are directly reported to Tesca in the form of electronic form. Next slide. So Tesca restrictions of PBTs. So this is a very important advancement in Tesca. It is effective from 8th March 2021. Again, as I said, Tesca is trying to include all the substances restrictions under its umbrella. So many of you may have received requests from your customers on the PBT presence. So effective from 28th March 2021, Tesca has included 5 substances as a restricted substances. That is the PBT substances. So those are PIP31, DecaBDE, TTBP, HCBD, and PCTP. Their CAS numbers are also given for your quick reference. So the manufacturers have to check if these CAS numbers are present, and they need to work on the elimination. They may not have any transitional periods for elimination. Next slide. And Tesca PFOs, this is another regulation. So that is next slide. This is another upcoming amendment to the Tesca. Especially it is under discussion. Similarly, you may have also received a lot of survey details from your OEs or customers on the PFOS, because PFOS are a part of POPs, or persistent organic pollutants. These PFOS are there are a number of PFOS which are present in the market. So now Tesca wanted to include them in their list, and so a company that manufactures or distributors or imports PFAS in any year after 1st January 2011 need to report the information to EPA. Please note that this information is required to be reported to EPA directly. It is not that you just get the details from your supplier and report it to your customer. Everybody in the chain has to report it to EPA if it becomes law. So what is the total production volume? What is the usage of substance? The way of disposal and exposure means, etc., has to be included in the electronic reporting to EPA directly. In the way of like the skip way, like the skip submission, we also need to directly report to EPA. The biggest challenge here is there are several thousands of PFAs that are available, and the complete list is not available to the public or to even the industry itself. Next slide. So now we shall look into some of the regulations in the Asia Pacific region. So one such regulation is India REACH. India REACH is still in the draft stage and may be implemented in 2022. If implemented, India REACH will replace the existing two regulations that are being governed by India, that is MSI HC rules and CAE EPR rules, PPR rules. So these will be replaced and it will become REACH. The draft at the outset follows the EU methodology. Like in the EU regulation, non-Indian companies can appoint an authorized representative in India to prepare and submit the notification and registrations to the Indian authority. Joint registrations are also acceptable. Next slide. So India REACH requires any substance that is manufactured, imported, or intended to be placed in the Indian territory need to be registered if it is greater than 1 ton per year. Currently, there is no SVHC list that is published yet. When it comes to article manufacturers, as per the current literature, it says, like the EU, if your product releases any intentional release of priority substances or SVHC substances that are manufactured or imported in the quantities of excess of 1 ton per year. Next slide. We'll talk about the China REACH. China REACH is almost identical to EU REACH. No, it is also governed by a new rule, even though it is an old regulation. That is, the draft was published in 2010, but with some new changes they have implemented from 1st January 2021. This is also called as MEE Order number 12, which has been officially enforced. So now the companies will be required to submit new chemical substance notifications to the Chinese Chemical Registration Center. It is also called a CRC. If they wish to import into the China or manufacture in China. The scope are in scope are any new substances, almost 46,000 odd substances are included in the scope, and existing substances and chemical substances other than the existing laws and regulations. So these are all exemptions. For example, pharmaceuticals, naturally occurring substances, impurities, these ceramic ware, etc. These are all exemptions. Next slide. So China REACH primarily focus on PBT to start with, and the first step is to submit a notification similar to the EU. If the company is not based in China, they need to have a Chinese entity to act as a local representative, like the OR in the EU. Once the details are submitted, and then the MEE will be granting and a certificate or registration number for the production to import. So currently there is no SVHC list that is published, but it is only accepting the registrations. But on the other hand, it has got a restriction type of list which is published that has got 117 substances, which is equivalent to the restriction substance list is equivalent to Annex 17 in EU if you compare it. I request Karen for the conclusion. Karen.
Thank you, Sri, and thank you, Krishna, as well, for that great insight and into the details about upcoming compliance regulations in 2022 and beyond. So let's recap. Next slide. All right. So the circular economy that has been spoken about in Europe for some time now, and the Europe Green Deal, is all about carbon neutrality and improving the environment. So the purposes of all of these compliances regulations is to help improve the environment that you work in and you live in on a regular basis. and to take better care of the earth as a whole. So implementing any transparency and ethical practices throughout the supply chain is the best thing to do. And you have to look at the entire supply chain, all the way from raw materials, acquisition and production, to the end consumer, and back from the disposal and recycle process. So full material declarations are necessary in order to make this process work. And so throughout, no matter what industry you're in, at some point you will have to deal with some of these compliance regulations. You can identify the risks in your supply chain and start implementing environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, practices within your organization to help the whole supply chain. Next slide. And APA software is here to help you. We have several solutions that can help you in your compliance management and regulatory management. First, we have conflict minerals management that includes the expansion of the Germany regulations. Then for those in the automotive sector, we have a specialized IMDS submit process called MDS Express. And then we also have solutions for REACH, SKIP, ROHS, and California Prop 65. And finally, we also have a solution for the United States where we can manage and help you understand state level restrictions and regulations called SIBs. Back over to Sri on the next slide.
Thank you, Karen. There are a few questions. The first question is this intention for the Emrt to replace the CRT? Yes. So essentially, it replaces the CRT. And even now, CRT is available for surveying your suppliers. But the advantage of Emrt is the combination of CRT as well as Emrt. That is, mica and cobalt can be combined and can be surveyed in the single form. We encourage you to use Emrt instead of CRT. The next question is, yeah, I have received, we have been receiving several requests on PFOAs. While customer is not indicating the complete list, can you help in sharing the list? Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, PFOAs are, they have multiple CAS numbers. Whatever we have available to the industry also are limited, and whatever we have, we can share that list. Even if you are a user of IMDS, you have the option to download PFA directly. But so please remember that POPs is the first list that has got hundreds, thousands of substances, and in POPs you have PFAs, and under PFAs you have PFOAs. So this is the hierarchy. PFOAs there are number of substances. There is no straight way to find out from the IMDS. We have a list. We can share that with you. The next question is, do you have further information about the mandatory FMDs? When shall this happen? So there is, FMD is not mandatory at this juncture. FMD stands for Full Metal Declaration. So to avoid multiple repetitive follow-up with the suppliers, it is always better to have Full Metal Declaration. Thereby, you need not go back to the supplier whenever the regulation changes or it gets amended. So hence we recommend the FMD. Nevertheless, it is not a mandatory requirement either in ROHS or REACH or any other regulation. Even in IMDS also, it is not, our ELV directive also, it is not mandatory. It is an OEM implementation to make everybody's life simple. Yeah, there are other questions. Maybe I will personally write to them on their emails. Since time is up, we'll wrap it up here.
And you can reach us at compliance@apaengineering.com.